For the heavens declare the glory of God. The skies proclaim the work of his hands. And they pour forth speech. However, having said that, going back to my glasses, if you checked your glasses, probably none of you would have exactly the same as mine. Some of you got big ones. Some of you more densely dense ones. Some of you have got really fancy ones. Being a Scotsman, I got really cheap ones. And in the end, the difference is design. That's the difference. And you don't have design without designer. It's just a fact. Oh, there is every so often the coincidence when you walk along a beach and some seaweed has been thrown up by the wave, that the seaweed seems to be the design of North America, or the design of Scotland, or the design of Australia. But it's sheer coincidence, because when it's taken out and brought back the next time, it's just seaweed, a lump of it and nothing more. And if you go to Mount Rushmore and you look up into the mountain and see these presidents' heads on Mount Rushmore, none of you are saying isn't it amazing what the wind and the rain did in these mountains? You see, the design that is observable, even to the point of recognizing the presidents that they depict, indicates someone designed it. Not just created it, but designed it so that they were recognizable. And so my second point is simply this. I think it's reasonable to believe in God because a design demands a designer. And let's be fair here and honest here. There is observable design and order in the universe. It's a teleological argument. There is observable design in the universe that demands an adequate designer. Now, I know some of you will be saying, what do you exactly mean by that here? Well, H2O in the given situation is water, or it is ice, or it is steam. It never coughs and splutters as something else. A scientist never has to wonder if it will become something different. The design is there. And the design is consistent. So that in every given situation, the scientist knows whether it will be water, it will be ice, or it will be steam. And he never has to take a second thought. That's very simple. Take, for instance, the seasons. There's spring, and there's summer. And someone went to fall right away. That's Scotland, and we have no summer. But spring, and summer, and fall, and winter. And it consistently comes every year. Where did that design come from? And we can go into very complicated areas, some of them that I find very fascinating. It was only, maybe 12 years ago, I caught up with the Fibonacci series. I have been staggered to Google Fibonacci and discover the amazing wealth of websites on this incredible number series that is found basically in the universe, on Earth, and even in the galaxies. You say, what's the Fibonacci series? Well, you start with 1 and you add 1. 1 plus 1 equals 2. Now you've got your answer 2, you go to your previous number and add it. 2 plus 1 equals 3. 3 plus 2 equals 5 plus 3 equals 8. Some of you have been away from school a long time, and you just keep building. That's what it is. Now, just as a matter of interest, on the top of a daisy, there are what are called little florets. There are 21 that go clockwise and 34 that go anti-clockwise. These are adjacent numbers on the Fibonacci series. And every daisy is consistently the same. Take, for instance, a pine cone. And I've done this in various countries in the world. Whether they're big or small, there are nodules on the pine cone, and there are 5 that spiral one way and 8 that spiral the other way. That means there are 8 coming out from the base, 8 fans or lines, and they spiral. 8 of them go in one direction, 5 in another. These are adjacent numbers in the Fibonacci series. And you can go to a pine cone, to a pineapple, and to a sunflower. In fact, sunflower is very fascinating. Because you know the seeds in the top of a sunflower, there are, on a small sunflower, there are 34 in one direction, spinning round in one direction, and then there are spirals, 55 in the other. These are adjacent numbers in the Fibonacci series. But interesting, when you move to the mid-size, the large spiral becomes the small number. And so you move from 55 to 89 the opposite way. These are adjacent numbers in the Fibonacci series. But when you go to the large one, the same thing happens again. You start with 89 going in one direction, and you have 144 going in the other. That's the Fibonacci series. The adjacent numbers. Who planted these? Who designed these? The consistency of them. And when you go to the galaxies, they also spiral on the basis of the Fibonacci series. That's why even a scientist who does not believe in God, or a scientist who is an evolutionist, will say this. He cannot deny the design that is there, but he uses a term, the appearance of design. That's what he calls it. The appearance of design, but there's no designer. It's chance. No one would imagine a watch coming into being without an intelligent designer. So said Paley in his great argument. How much more incredible to believe a universe with its infinite complexity could have happened by chance. Einstein said this, "My religion consists of a humble admiration of the illimitable superior spirit who reveals himself in the slight details we are able to perceive with our frail and feeble minds. That deeply emotional conviction of the presence of a superior reasoning power, which is revealed in the incomprehensible universe, forms my idea of God." How did he come to that point? He was an atheist at this, before that. What brought him to this point? Well, you can read it in his letters to a French physicist called De Sitter, in which he pleads against the Big Bang Theory on one reason only. Not a scientific one, a philosophic one. And you can read all these letters. And he says, though the Big Bang term had not been used at that time, that was a ridiculed term by a British scientist that stuck. Basically, he was saying, if you start with nothing, producing everything, you're opening up the supernatural. Basically, what I would be saying, when you start with a big bang and you have no banger, you can't have a bang. And Einstein came to the belief that I've just read to you, and moved from atheist to a belief in the illimitable superior reasoning spirit that formed his idea of God. And he became a deist. And there are many in the scientific world today moving in that direction. J.W.N. Sullivan is another scientist who died. At his death, Time magazine called him one of the world's 4 or 5 most brilliant interpreters of the physics to the world of ordinary men and women. He said this, "The beginning of the evolutionary process raises a question which is yet unanswerable. What was the origin of life on this planet? Until very recent times, there was pretty general belief in the occurrence of spontaneous generation. It was supposed that lower forms of life developed spontaneously, for example, from putrefying meat. But careful experiment, notably those of Pasteur, showed that this conclusion was due to improper observation. And it became an accepted doctrine that life never arises except from life. So far as actual evidence goes, this still is the only possible conclusion. But since it is a conclusion that seems to lead back to some supernatural creative act, it is a conclusion that scientific men find very difficult to accept. My question is, why? Why? Why should it be difficult to accept that a creation needs a creator? And so he doesn't deny, but he tries to soften it by saying that we find it difficult to accept. It carries with it what is felt to be in the present mental climate undesirable philosophic implications. What's undesirable in having a creation behind the creator? And what's undesirable about having a design behind the designer? What's undesirable about that? Oh, unless, of course, you may have to submit to the Creator's rules and his lifestyle. So he carries on, and he says this, and it is opposed to the scientific desire for continuity. But they already have started with no continuity. They've started with nothing, producing everything, which I would think is very undesirable compared with a creation producing and needing a creator, and a design needing a designer. It introduces an unaccountable break in the chain of causation, and therefore cannot be admitted as part of science, and then he softens it, unless it is quite impossible to reject. For this reason, most scientists prefer to believe that life arose in some way not yet understood from inorganic matter in accordance with the law of physics and chemistry. Actually, he said in all of his research over his years that consistently his research came back for the need of a designer. Now, how much research do you have to do before you accept your research? See, the problem in the end was not his mind. His problem was his will. He didn't want to find a designer, which is a big difference. So what about Stephen Hawking, the British scientist who many of you have heard because of his motor neuron syndrome disease and illness speak through a speech simulator that he operates with one finger, the only one he's got left that moves. And already they have ready for him one that will operate from him opening and closing an eye when this finger goes. The only interesting thing to some of us is he's an Englishman, but his voice simulator is an American. He says this, if the rate of expansion 1 second after the Big Bang had been smaller by even 1 part in 100,000 million, the universe would have recollapsed before it ever reached its present state. He goes on to cite the critical ratio between the masses of protons and electrons as one of the many fundamental numbers in nature, and he adds, the remarkable fact is that the value of these numbers seem to have been very finely adjusted to make possible the development of life. So he's already asking questions. Freeman Dyson, the Princeton physicist, said this, the more I examine the universe and the details of its architecture, the more evidence I find that the universe, in some sense, must have known we were coming. I love that one. It knew we were coming. It was made for us coming. While John O'Keefe of NASA says, it is my view that these circumstances indicate that the universe was created for man to live in. While Heinz Oppenheimer, the astrophysicist at the University of Vienna, Austria, says, I'm not a religious person. I always love how people have to say that. I am not a religious person. That is your religion. I'm not religious. Like the person said, I'm not a philosopher, and then they give you their philosophy. I'm not a religious person, but I could say that this universe is designed very well for the existence of life. The basic forces in the universe are tailor-made for the production of carbon-based life. We've no idea why the strengths of the forces are so finely tuned. Well, wouldn't you think you would try and find out? But we don't want to get the answer that seems obvious from what we're researching. Tell me, can I throw it in here? Who's kissing goodbye to their brains? You or them? Like a student that told me at university, see, I can't believe you, and I'm intelligent. I looked at him, I said, well, what do you think I am? Oh, well, I don't mean you're not, but, I'm scientifically trained. I simply said, the more scientific knowledge you have, it should be plainer and easier to see the necessity for an intelligent, creative designer. So here I am. I'm in a school in London, England. And I'm speaking to 300 students. And right in the middle of my talk, a boy stops me and says, excuse me. And this is what he did. Are you trying to tell us that all of this didn't happen by chance? I said, yeah. That's exactly what I'm telling you, and I'm glad I'm communicating so well. He said, well, you're wrong. I said, fine. Give me your evidence. And this is what he said. I could give someone a Rubik Cube that was all mixed up. You want to know something? My heart went into overdrive. My Bible college taught me nothing about Rubik Cubes. I couldn't find anything in Josh McDowell's Evidence That Demands a Verdict about Rubik Cubes. Rabbi Zacharias doesn't deal with Rubik Cubes. So I started to pray. And it's that moment when fancy prayers are useless, you know? It's no use saying, oh God of Jeroboam, Rehoboam, and all the wee boams. That's no use. So I use my simplest prayer, and it just goes, help. I was praying it. Help me, help. And I listened to this is what he said. See if you see the flaw in his argument. I can give someone a Rubik Cube that's all jumbled up, and I tell them, I want all the blues on one side, reds in another, greens in another, yellows in another, etc., and by pure chance they can do it. Therefore, the universe could have happened by chance. I said, that didn't prove your point at all. That proves my point. How does it prove your point? I said, because an intelligent, rational designer, a mathematician by the name of Rubik, a Hungarian, created the cube and put the design there. All you did was jumbled it up, and all your friend did, by trial and error, restore it to the original perfection and design that was put there by the intelligent, rational mathematician Rubik. And then I thought, God, that was great. So I memorized it, and that's how you got it today. I said, oh, by the way, if you want the universe happening by chance using Rubik Cubes, take millions of pieces of Rubik Cubes, all broken down, put them in a room with no windows, no lights, and guess what? Take 10 boys and blindfold them. Put them into the room and blindfolded in total darkness, ask them to pick up little pieces of Rubik Cube and join them together. And as they put them together, eventually they have a cube. Now tell them to come out with their cube, take off their blindfold. How many will find all the blues on one side, all the yellows on one side, all the reds on another side? And he said, it'll never happen. I said, you know why? Chance plus chance produces what? Chance. But design plus designer necessitates rather designer. And so the wonderful truth to me is that all of the scientific research that I discover as I read, because I'm no scientist, but I can read, what I discover is this, that there is this tremendous move of intelligent design by scientists who are well qualified in the field, who will consistently show us that this could not have happened by chance. So what does the Bible say? What may be known about God, Romans chapter 1, verse 19 and 20, what may be known about God is plain to them, because God has made it plain to them. For since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made, so that men and women are without excuse. So it's as simple as this. A book needs a bookmaker. The creation, the design of the book, big, small, thick, whatever, the colors need a designer. Glasses need a glassmaker. The shape and style need a designer. And tied into that is this incredible order. Have you ever thought if your glasses were put together the wrong way and you had one leg going up and one leg going down? No, you wouldn't be as silly as that, would you? Okay, let me ask you this. Have you ever put some furniture you had to put together yourself? And you finished the wardrobe and you had 6 screws left over in one panel. Haven't you done something like that? You should have read right at the beginning where it says, please read the instructions. And then at the end when it says, when all else fails, please go back to the instructions. You see, a design needs a designer. And it needs intelligence that puts it all together so that we now have a cosmos, we do not have a chaos, which is wonderful. And so the heavens declare the glory of God. He is the creator behind the creation. But the earth itself, though including more, we read in Romans, what has been known about God is plain. For since the creation of the world, the invisible qualities, his eternal power and deity have been clearly seen in what has been made. What is it takes people at the top of a mountain and they're the awe of the view? What is it takes people back to nature where they feel at one in a sense with themselves? Do you know what it is? They're getting so close to the evidence that God's given in his visible creation that he, the invisible creator, exists. Now my question is this. Is there any evidence that this intelligent, creative designer has ever visited his creation or entered into his design? Is there any evidence? Is there any evidence that God is interested in us? We'll look at that in our next session.